If you've been following the materials that we've been publishing inside of our community and some of which we've been publishing on our YouTube channel, then you may have noticed a few running themes throughout many of the videos. So for example, in 2018, I had published a video called The 3 Core Business Analysis Skills, where I talked about how you should be learning the ability to do business requirements and functional specifications, after which you can branch out and learn additional skills and specialize in certain areas. There was an entire video in 2019 where I talked about some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks between being a specialist versus being a generalist. And all throughout 2020 and 2021, made it a big effort to reach out to analysts who are specialists in certain areas to understand some of the specialties that exist within our profession. And in the live session that we had earlier this year, one of the major factors, if you recall from that determines the types of business analyst jobs that exist out there and the type of business analyst that you want to become a good fit for those jobs, was whether you are a generalist or a specialist, right? That has really just been a running theme throughout many of the things that we've talked about here in our community. And in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the concept of specialization and give you some sense about the strategies that you have available to you when you're trying to become a specialist in a certain domain. Now, oftentimes when I'm asked a question by an analyst about whether they should be a generalist or whether they should specialize, for 95% of the folks out there, I would say that specialization is probably the better option, because you really have to be a certain type of person to be a generalist and have to put up with a lot of the downsides of being a generalist. Has to, kind of brings with it. And again, if you watch the previous videos, you'll kind of get a good sense of what some of those downsides are. But in this video, I want to offer you some approaches to see and understand really your options for understanding on how you can specialize. The first of those options has to do with the fact that you have the ability to specialize by domain if you'd like to, right? So there are a lot of different areas of business that business analysts can help support. And when you start to learn about those different areas of business, whether they be certain industries that you're learning about, certain functions within an enterprise, such as HR, for example, that you're learning about, there are different ways that you can start to specialize just by learning about how businesses function within certain contexts, right? And an example you can see here is, for example, this business analyst role that is looking for a senior business analyst in capital markets, right? The capital markets are a certain sector of the financial services industry, and it is an area that you can start to learn a lot more about if you want to start to qualify for roles that are looking for analysts with that kind of domain knowledge, right? So, and if you look at the details of this job posting itself, that'll actually already start to give it away to you, because if you don't have the domain knowledge to be able to apply in that domain, it is going to be very difficult for you to even understand some of the stuff that they're talking about, right? So for example, if you don't know what the capital markets is all about and how a lot of the organizations within those markets function, you might not even understand what they're asking for when they say that they want you to be supporting to the front and back office trading lifecycle. I mean, what does that even mean, right? You can start to see just by looking at some of the job postings that are in those specialist areas that even just understand what they're asking for, there is a base level of domain knowledge that you have to have, and that's what it means to specialize by domain, right? Your second option here really is to specialize by system, and a perfect example of that is this job posting from Capgemini that is looking for somebody to fulfill the role of a Salesforce business analyst, right? And in this type of a role, what they're essentially looking for in detail is that they're looking for somebody who has the ability to be able to do the functional configuration or the functional design in one of the modules within the Salesforce platform, right? And they'll list a couple of different modules that they're looking for here. But again, for you to even really kind of understand what that really means, you really have to understand how these types of products function. as a base level of understanding, but even within Salesforce, again, they're asking you for understanding how to do Salesforce marketing, sales, services, communities, et cetera, right? These are all different modules within the Salesforce platform that you as an analyst would have to learn to be able to qualify for a role as the Salesforce analyst for this role, specifically at Capgemini, right? And so again, when you're looking at the different types of options that you have, generally speaking, from a career strategy perspective, you're looking at either specializing by domain or specializing by system as your first step, right? But once you get into a certain level of understanding with whether you've chosen a domain or a system to specialize by, really the ideal place for you to be at is in a situation where you're now starting to specialize even more by combining the domain knowledge with some system or the system that you've learned with additional domain knowledge. And the conversation that I had with Vanessa that is posted inside our community is a perfect example of how an analyst like that would function, right? If you've watched this interview, you'll understand how it is that Vanessa has kind of specialized on her own by, first of all, going down the path of understanding what the system is all about, and eventually, not just stopping there, but eventually starting to learn enough about the domain of the areas that she works in to be in a position where she can start to advise her clients, not just on how the system should be configured and what the capabilities of the system are, but also how they should be structuring their business processes to meet certain best practices that would make them a good fit for a certain type of configuration that they would have, right? That is a much deeper understanding of the domain that you would gain as somebody who's specializing in Salesforce, for example, if you want to have that type of a career that Vanessa has, right? That is one strategy where you're coming down and you're really just spending all of your time for the first couple of years understanding the systems inside out. And as a part of the implementations that you do, you'll naturally start to pick up some understanding of the domain knowledge, and you start to see that your domain knowledge is going to start to accumulate, and then you can get additional domain knowledge in that area by taking courses or doing whatever else that you need to do to learn about the domain so that you can become much more of a advisor for your employers or to your clients than just somebody who's just working with the system, right? And so that, again, when it comes to specialization, you have the option of starting with either or, because if you look at Rishi, for example, that we've seen multiple interviews with, you see that his expertise is strictly in this domain area. Typically, if they're doing working on some sort of a system, he'll learn enough about the types of systems that they're working with and apply his domain knowledge to make sure that those systems are being configured the wrong way. He's not necessarily committed to any one specific system that may exist within the capital markets space, right? So again, these are really the two different ways. You know, it's the way that you can look at it is if you kind of get one foot in the door and you start to build that up a little bit, and then you start to get the other foot in the door, and then you're really all in that area of specialization. And again, if you haven't already watched the interview that we had with Vanessa, I mean, it's such a good demonstration of somebody who has specialized. But if you just listen to the way that she speaks about the subject matter, there's a certain level of comfort that she has about speaking about the subject matter with confidence and with authority, right? Having the ability to speak that way about a certain subject requires a lot of domain knowledge and a lot of systems knowledge to be able to just speak so fluently about a lot of the different subjects that we talk about. And you can see that she's perfectly comfortable talking about it and there isn't very much fluff in that video because of the fact that she knows exactly what she's talking about because she's a specialist in that area, right? So really just kind of understand that those are your two options. Now, when it comes to deciding how to actually choose a specialty, this is one of the things that is very difficult for anybody to tell you, but I'll give you a few pointers that'll help you make the decision on your own. And part of the reason why it's difficult for anybody to tell you is that it is very, very heavily reliant on the market that you have access to, right? Now, business analysis is a global profession, right? There are business analysts all around the globe, but not every business analyst has access to every job market, right? And the job market that you might have in the area that you're in, or the job market that you might have access to, is very different from the job market that somebody else has access to, even though there is a lot of conversations happening globally about what's hot versus what's not. So for example, if you, let's say out of the blue, you just pick Salesforce as the area that you want to specialize in because you think it's the hot one. Well, if you do a quick scan of your job market, you may realize that there isn't anybody within that market that you have access to that actually hires for that type of a skill set. So now you're in a situation where you've picked something you think is hot in the market, but you don't actually have access to those types of jobs because it just isn't available in your market for whatever reason. There might be another dominant player in that space that really kind of owns a certain geographic area, for example, or a certain industry that you have access to. And that's why it's nearly impossible for anybody, unless that person is a specialist in your market, like a recruiter or a hiring manager who understands the market that you're in very well. There are very few people who can actually tell you what to actually specialize in, right? So for example, I'm here in Toronto. Toronto being the third biggest financial center in North America, financial services is always a good bet, right? Because lots of banks, a lot of companies in the financial markets or the capital markets, a lot of insurance companies, and a lot of the financial services, again, after New York and Chicago, Toronto is the third biggest financial center, and that's why it has such a huge demand for people who are in like the capital markets and in banking and insurance, for example, right? If I was somewhere down in Houston, Texas, for example, and I did a quick scan of the market by doing a quick search, I might find that there isn't that much capital markets related skill sets or demand down there. Might be much more in the oil industry or in the energy sector in general, right? Same thing would happen if I was somewhere out in the Middle East, or some certain places in Australia are very heavy in the mining industry. If I go to Calgary, Alberta, it's going to be all energy, right? And so again, depending on where you are and what market exists in terms of the job market for you, should be the single biggest indicator to you about what area that you want to specialize in, right? If you're in a place that is very heavy in mining, you should stick in mining because your ability to land a role there and build a successful business analysis career in that market is going to be much higher if there's a huge abundance of that type of hiring, right? So do not underestimate this, and you always use the job market as the most important signal to you about what you should be doing with your business analysis career. And once you've done that, then you want to start looking at your aptitudes. What are your natural aptitudes? Are you much more of a systems person? Are you much more of a business person? Because depending on which one of those you are, you may choose to either go down and specialize in a system first, or you may go down to the domain side of things and specialize in a certain domain before you jump over to the other one, because your natural aptitudes will make it much easier for you to learn something. So for example, if you're much more of a technical person, it may be much easier for you to understand how to configure enterprise software in whatever package you've chosen than for you to learn the business domain, right? So for that type of a person, it would make much more sense for them to actually learn that system inside out and then start to broaden their knowledge in the domain space, right? If you're much more on the business side of things, let's say you're somebody who does accounting and you really want to understand that space much better, and then kind of commit yourself to learning, Ceridian or some Oracle or some other package of financial or accounting software, then your strategy would be to really just make sure you understand the domain well enough, and then start to kind of learn one of the packages that is in high demand within the market that you have access to, right? So if you start to take control of your own career in this way and start to do the research, you really don't have to rely on a lot of other people to help you make those decisions, because you become much more intelligent about what's in demand, and you can start to apply this way of thinking, not just today, but in 5 years when the market changes, you can change along with it if you're kind of thinking along these lines, right? Third thing that you want to always think about, once you have these two already taken into account, your third priority is, again, your own interests, right? If you're interested in a certain area and you can kind of find something in your market and your aptitudes match, then that's really kind of the third kind of guiding principle that you want to use to try to help you figure out what area you want to be in, right? If there's high demand for a lot of packages and you have good aptitude on the technical side, it might be your interest that helps you make the decision between whether you want to get into insurance or whether you want to get into the capital markets, for example, right? And so that is really kind of the third priority that you want to kind of put into effect when you're making your decision. So again, I can't tell you what to specialize in because I don't know what market you're in. I have no idea what your aptitudes are like, and I don't know what your interests are, but you do, right? And the information about your job market is out there. You don't have to spend weeks to do this, right? You might spend a couple of hours, search the job postings in your area, and just do a quick scan and understand what kind of roles are being hired for and why, right? Understand the markets that you have access to and understand what kind of demand they might have for your business analyst roles, and then start to analyze the rest of these. So hopefully that kind of gives you some sense of how to do this. Now, if you are somebody who is interested in the capital markets and you want to start learning about that domain a lot more to be able to start to qualify for certain types of roles that will make it mandatory to have a certain level of base domain knowledge, then I'm going to recommend that you attend our live session this Sunday coming up with Rishi, because what Rishi is going to do in that session is he is going to help us get a very clear picture of the mind map that he's put together about the course that he's going to be teaching for us, right? And even if you choose not to take that course, attend the session. It's not going to cost you anything to get a very clear idea of all of the major subjects. And the mind map is actually about 3 pages long, so I couldn't fit it all in here, but you'll get a very clear idea of exactly what kind of concepts are needed that you should be understanding, regardless of whether you decide to actually sign up for the course or not. Things that can give you a really good sampling of the types of things that you should be focusing on if that's an area of interest for you. And even just attending this session might help you decide, hey, this is something I'm interested in, or maybe it's not for you, right? But it won't cost you anything to join us. So again, if that's an area, attend this. But if it's not, here my goal here at BA Blocks is to make sure that we provide you with stuff that actually helps you in your career. And the closer we can get to certain specializations, the more we will. So if we can find other areas that you may be interested in that you think are in high demand that a lot of other students would benefit from, you have those types of suggestions, for sure leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to try to bring on some experts to help us kind of understand that domain, like the conversations we've had with Rishi and with Vanessa and with Vijay in the past, right? So I'll leave this video here and I'll see you on the next one. Hopefully I'll see you in the live session on Sunday as well.